The Battle of Kursk, the largest tank battle in history, was a brutal German offensive met by fierce Soviet resistance. On July 8, 1943, near the village of Teterevino, a German Tiger I commander was said to have single-handedly destroyed over 50 Soviet tanks. A legendary feat, but one shrouded in controversy. Today we dive into both sides of this incredible story to uncover the truth behind the myth, and you might be surprised by what we find. It is July 8, 1943. A squad of German soldiers desperately seeks cover under a relentless barrage. Shells explode around them, and machine gun fire rips through the air overhead. It is a violent and disorienting firefight. Peering over their earthen wall at the battlefield beyond, they open fire with their rifles, but they achieve little, for they face not men, but a wall of heavy war machines. Along the front line, countless T-34 tanks roll menacingly through a hail of bullets. It is a massive counterattack involving 9 tank brigades and infantry. The entire defensive line is under shell fire. Retreat. The Germans pull back into their shallow trenches as the Soviet tanks exploit their advantage and advance on their lines. As the tanks draw closer, the German infantry has a plan. They possess a new weapon, a hollow charge grenade. The tanks rumble over the trench line. The infantry waits, machine gun fire cutting down some of their comrades. As the tanks pass, the infantry hurls anti-tank mines onto the rear of the T-34s. Not all are successful, but 2 T-34s are knocked out by this daring assault. The Soviets press on. Yet, unnoticed, a predator lurks in the distance. A heavy Tiger I tank, commanded by Unterscharführer Franz Staudegger of the 1st SS Panzer Division. He isn't supposed to be fighting. He had fallen behind his unit to repair a broken suspension. But now, 3 T-34 tanks roll across the field before him, without discernible formation. They occasionally stop and fire at the makeshift German trenches, surrounded by the smoke and dust of battle. Perfect conditions. He gives the gunner a target and orders, "Fire." With a muzzle flash, the Tiger unleashes its formidable firepower, sending the 88mm shell hurtling through the air. Trailing a green tracer, it strikes precisely through the enemy's frontal armor, disabling it. The remaining tanks seem oblivious, but Staudegger is not surprised. It will be his pleasure to turn the distracted enemy tanks into scrap metal. Fire. Another thud echoes across the fields, and with it, another T-34 erupts in flames. Good shot. Keep it up. The loader takes another armor-piercing shell and rams it into the breach, just as the gunner acquires his target. Fire. The shell hits the enemy tank, bringing it to a halt. But then, its turret begins to traverse. Another one. The T-34 is hit by a follow-up shot, and smoke billows from its hatches. In little more than a minute, all 3 enemy tanks in his sights are eliminated, without a single shot fired in return. Suddenly, he notices movement. Another T-34 rolls over the railway embankment, and then another, and another. The bulk of the unit has arrived. But Staudegger remains undeterred. Fire. Shells strike the enemy tank, and it meets the same fate as its comrades before it. Finally, the Soviets notice the attack, and more T-34s roll over the embankment. There are already more than a dozen, and more are coming. But Staudegger's Tiger destroys another enemy, and at last, the Soviets spot the German tank. One of the T-34s traverses its turret and returns fire, but the shell impacts the ground, and that only cost them 5 tanks. Keep firing. Staudegger now keeps moving, cautiously shifting from cover to cover. The German crew aims with precision. Another T-34 goes up in flames as the enemy tanks finally realize the gravity of their situation. The fire directed at the Tiger increases by the second. Staudegger constantly changes his position to avoid being an easy target, yet the Soviet guns find him. An enemy shell strikes the armor with a deafening crash but fails to penetrate. Staudegger remains utterly unfazed. He knows his tank. He knows its technology is superior. The Soviet 76mm gun is no match for the Tiger. Target, 37 degrees, fire. The gunner obeys without hesitation, and another T-34 explodes into 1,000 pieces. More shells hit the Tiger. Loud crashes reverberate through the hull. The loader hurries to shove another armor-piercing shell into the breach. Another impact booms, then another, and another. The Tiger desperately seeks cover, but under the hail of enemy fire, more and more shells embed themselves in the armor, or ricochet in all directions, without damaging the seemingly invincible German tank in the slightest. Staudegger remains remarkably calm, directing fire with cold and calculated precision. The Soviet losses mount, yet they do not turn back. On the contrary, they push forward even harder. The T-34s storm across the open field, away from the cover of the railway embankment they had just crossed. "Come to me, my darlings." The Tiger continues to claim victims in droves, firing as fast as it can reload, while shells continue to bounce off its armor. Its hull is riddled with dozens, perhaps even hundreds of impact marks, but the behemoth is still fully operational. "We have no more armor-piercing shells, Herr Kommandant. They are running out of armor-piercing ammunition, but the Germans are so confident that they switch to high-explosive shells and continue their massacre undeterred." Without any external support, Staudegger and his Tiger bring the Soviet advance to a grinding halt. Defeated, the T-34s finally recognize the situation and turn back, seeking safety behind the railway embankment. Staudegger continues to give fire orders, determined to eliminate as many as possible. But ultimately, the Soviets manage to escape, and silence descends upon the battlefield. Before him lie 17 burning wrecks. Not enough for Staudegger. "Driver, prepare to advance. We're going to hunt them." An incredibly risky maneuver. They would leave the safety of their position even though they have no more armor-piercing ammunition. And furthermore, the recently repaired suspension might not be functioning correctly. "There's nothing to fear. Let's go." But Staudegger doesn't care. Remarkably, despite the many hits, his tank tracks are undamaged. The Tiger's engine roars as it moves forward. The driver meticulously monitors the makeshift repaired suspension as they traverse the kilometer-long battlefield. They reach the railway embankment, cross the tracks, and on the other side, they discover the remaining T-34 tanks and their crews regrouping in the distance. The roar of the powerful 88mm cannon echoes once more across the battlefield, and the shell hurtles towards the unsuspecting targets. The high-explosive shell impacts between the tanks, destroying one of them and killing some of the men. The soldiers rush back to their tanks and open fire, but their shots simply ricochet, just like all the others before. The Tiger traverses its turret and destroys the next T-34 with a single brutal blow. Many retreat in panic. Some try to fight back. Other tanks stand motionless. Their crews have fled on foot at the sight of the terrifying Tiger. As the dust settles, 5 more tanks are reduced to scrap. In total, 22 tank wrecks now lie on the battlefield, destroyed by a single Tiger I under Staudegger's command. But his tank also bore scars. Soviet tank commanders hit his Tiger I a full 67 times. For his services in this battle, Staudegger was awarded the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross. This heroic account, however, contrasts sharply with the Soviet experience on that very same day. It is July 8, 1943. The 26th Tank Brigade of the 2nd Tank Corps is southeast of the village of Prokhorovka. The commander of the 282nd Battalion, Captain Leonid Raygorodski, waits nervously in his T-34. He has received extremely vague orders to attack the Germans and capture 2 villages, Teterevino, near the expected front line, and Luchki, a little further away. It is 4:30 p.m., and 32 T-34 medium tanks and 21 T-70 light tanks set off. The villages had been lost only the day before. There are virtually no battle plans, and all 5 company commanders and both battalion commanders have no maps of the area. There is no artillery support and no mechanized infantry in the rear. But an order is an order. Soon, they hear the rattling of shots against the hull, and over the radio, orders to open fire resound. The massive tanks come to life, firing volleys of high-explosive shells at the German positions before them. The 76mm cannons recoil violently, filling the turret with acrid smoke. Raygorodski tries to keep a clear head. His perception of the world is limited to his gun sight and a few vision slits. In the T-34-76, the commander is also the gunner, so he struggles to look around and find targets. Then, through the explosions, ricocheting bullets, and desperate cries of battle, he hears something. Something in the distance grows louder and louder. A wail, the unmistakable wail of a Stuka. Evasive maneuvers. He can only keep driving and hope for the best as the Stuka's wail grows louder. It is a harbinger of doom, drowning out every other sound, intended to strike mortal fear into the Soviets. Outside, a massive explosion is heard. The crew doesn't know if anyone was hit. They also cannot check, as the order forward blares over the radio. 5 tanks to Raygorodski's right roll forward over the elevated tracks and disappear from view. The sounds of battle grow louder. There are several enormous explosions. Then, it's Raygorodski's turn. He and a group of other Soviet tanks drive towards the railway tracks. As they cross the railway line and the tanks dip downwards, a terrifying sight is revealed. Of the 5 tanks that cross the tracks, 3 are already burning, and the battle is in full swing. Raygorodski's tank fires, hammering the enemy lines. Clouds of dust rise into the air. Orange flashes pierce the haze, transforming what were once Soviet tanks into bursting masses of metal. The Soviets are under heavy fire. Mortars, anti-tank grenades, artillery, and tank fire rain down on them. The Germans are firing everything they have. Captain Raygorodski sees his comrades falling lifelessly around him. Take cover. He orders his driver to take cover behind a burning tank while he desperately tries to get an overview of the situation. The radio is overwhelmed with comrades reporting targets, trying in vain to organize, and shouting over each other. Raygorodski scans the terrain on his own with his simple, small turret sight. He sees nothing until a sudden bright muzzle flash betrays the enemy's position. It is so far away that even now that he knows where it is, he barely distinguishes more than a dot. He tries to aim anyway. After all, their lives depend on it. The crosshairs land on the origin of the flash, and he fires. The shell streaks through the air, but he has no idea where it lands. He fires again and again. Around him, tanks open fire on the numerous enemies, but it does little good. One after another, they are knocked out. The situation is utterly hopeless. Raygorodski cannot deliver a killing blow. Damn it. Finally, an order comes over the radio. The brigade commander orders a retreat. One by one, the T-34s begin their withdrawal. Then Raygorodski joins them, providing covering fire as shells impact around them. Small caliber rounds bounce off the armor as everyone flees towards the safety of the railway embankment. But the Germans do not give up, and another nearby tank explodes in flames. Cover is close, almost within reach. Another shell impacts the ground next to them. Go, faster. Raygorodski's heart races as they retreat to save their lives. Full throttle. An 88mm shell whistles across the battlefield. Trailing a green tracer, it flies directly towards a T-34, Raygorodski's tank. The shell penetrates the armor. The crew perishes, becoming part of the long list of fallen Soviet soldiers. The remaining T-34s and T-70s roll over the railway tracks, constantly under fire. The German tanks cease fire. They are safe for now. At the end of the day, a total of 21 T-34s and 1 T-70 had been destroyed. 5 of the wrecks were found in front of the railway tracks, out of Staudegger's line of sight, and most likely victims of artillery or Stukas. The sheer volume of fire in the main combat zone made it virtually impossible to determine precisely who had destroyed which tank. However, this did not stop the German high command from ignoring the actions of other participants in the battle. Instead, they attributed all the day's kills to Staudegger, portraying him as a war hero, and using it as an example of the invincible Tiger's superiority. Unterscharführer Franz Staudegger survived the war. He was never prosecuted for his role in the SS, and passed away peacefully in 1991.